Hey everyone, it's time for another 3 at 3 on Solar PV. I'm Jenn Runyon, Editor-in-Chief of Renewable Energy World.
And I'm Paula Mintz, Chief Market Research Analyst, SPV Market Research.
Cool. Hi Paula.
Hey Jen, how you doing?
I'm okay. All right everyone, so we take 3 topics, we talk about them for 3 minutes each, and then we all go back to our day. So today we're talking about the utility backlash against solar. Not such a good thing. Then we're going to talk about something that's way out in the future, but is kind of cool. I've been learning more and more about it, called blockchain. And lastly, we're going to touch on diversity in the solar industry as a global industry. So let's start with utility backlash. This is pretty important and kind of not so good news. So what have you been hearing, Paula?
Well, it's not hearing it, as you know, it's from trying to research, but also hearing,
Yeah.
paying attention.
Sure.
And this has been a slow rumbling wave for a while. And you take it market by market by market. The fact of the matter is, installing renewables, that are variable resources, wind and solar, focusing on those, that's sort of not the utility model globally, right? Mm-hmm. So things really have to change to embrace it and move forward. And I think we've kind of ignored that in the industry. So the 2 examples are ESCOM, which I understand is from you, actually, is now standing up and saying, no, we love solar. But in reality, they're trying to renegotiate all their PPAs.
Right.
And that's because their cost structure is not set up to keep adding IPPs, independent power producers, and buying electricity from them. That's because their demand is slowing, actually. Their infrastructure needs fixing. So they got a whole host of problems, and now they're pushing back. Mm-hmm. In the U.S., we have Duke, which, has basically said, no, we're going to lose money on this because the avoided cost could be blah. The avoided cost model is really not the right model for a diverse, renewable, dominated electricity infrastructure. So what we have here is decades of yanking the utilities along by the throat and having to force them, and that is the truth. There are pockets of differences, but having to force them to include renewables. And the backlash is they don't want to.
Well, right, and what their point, but so their examples are, hey, look, your equipment costs are so low. Why should we have to pay a PPA at $58 a megawatt hour? And I just made that number up, but I believe Duke was saying, no, we want these to be down to 35, right. And it's pretty low.
Yeah, well, we talked about that last week, so I'm just going to go through that real briefly. So first of all, they're looking at the falling prices or cost to them for natural gas, which actually may bump up a little. But nonetheless, that's what they're citing. And we are at fault ourselves for citing this slippery slope down into unprofitability and module prices right now that are not in any way, shape, or form. They just don't relate to the cost of producing these very low modules.
Right.
And and so like with anything, it's the extremes that get pressed, the extremely low module prices, the extremely low PPAs, and then what happens in the mind of anybody is that everybody goes, okay, eventually it's like a game of telephone. Everybody says, okay, that's the average.
Right.
And everybody will have a data point to support it. So it's deadly. And here's where we are. And right now in the U.S., we're moving into a political climate where the support may not be as strong.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really a bad sign.
Yeah. So is there anything to be done at this point? Or just keep your eye on it. What would you say if you're a solar developer in North Carolina trying to go against?
Well, quite frankly, it's solar developers all over the country. They're not just focused on one market typically.
Yeah.
So the big ones anyway. So honestly, it's lobbying.
Yeah.
It's getting the right information out there. Honestly, the correct information, saying, yeah, this is a low, but here's really what the average is. Here's what it really cost us. Here's what you save down the line. Mm-hmm. And not like ridiculously low LCOE projections.
Yeah.
Assuming sort of a conservative flow down. Here's what happens if the utility model doesn't change. Here's why it's a good thing. And we need to be talking I hate to use the word rationally, but what the heck, rationally to people and offering them data that makes sense.
Yeah.
And pushing back.
And that's what you do. And that's what you do. That's what your reports really are.
Life.
Well, you do a nice job at analyzing all that stuff. So we're moving on to blockchain. Okay, this is cool stuff. Now, I heard this first at Distributech. A person in the audience said, "Can you tell us about blockchain?" And it was a utility up on stage. It was actually a panel of utilities, and they said, "We don't know anything about it, but we've heard it's going to completely change our world."
Wait, before you go on.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody says we don't know anything about it, but it's going to completely change our world, I think you can discount the completely change our world and go right back to saying,
okay, that's what I thought. And then I started to poke into it. So here's what it is. It's the technology that runs Bitcoin. Now, I know. Everybody goes, Bitcoin, oh, come on, that didn't go anywhere, that's not working. And that's absolutely might be true. But what it does is it lets you eliminate any institution that exists just to collect money, just to transform your payment to this person. So, for example, us paying a utility. We pay them to give us something that they generate over here, right. They deliver it over there. So what if we could just pay the generator? What if we can just pay someone else? And it's going to save everybody money. And we're all
aside from the fact that the laws in most countries would have to change?
Oh, everything would have to change. Entire institutions need to break down. I mean, and that's why this is far, far away. But there are a number of utilities, not in the U.S., but utilities across the world that are doing these blockchain pilots, and I've talked about them in the next issue of Renewable Energy World. That's the March-April issue. You all should subscribe to it right now so you can read about it and see what's going on. But it's interesting technology, and it really does seem like it could have some viable options.
So, number one, I do know about it, so I understand, and that I couldn't have done a better description. The thing I will go back to is we don't know anything about it, but it's going to completely transform our industry. Unlikely. Yeah. Because it all goes back to what we were just talking to, and that's the utility revenue and cost model. Mm. And anything that attacks their revenue and cost model will stay a pilot as long as they can keep it a pilot. Sure. So that gets back to, influencing the politicians and the governments, showing why something is a better model. That may well be a piece of moving the industry into a more diverse portfolio of electricity sources dominated by renewables, but it's by no means necessarily going to transform our industry, because again, we are dragging, no matter what they say. Anyway, again, anybody that says, I don't know anything about it, but it's going to I've heard.
They're telling us it's going to happen. And what that means is, so in a practical sense.
No, it goes back to the I don't know anything about it. You cannot follow with I've heard it is.
Okay.
You
All
can't.
Right. Okay, fine.
This is John Oliver talking to you here in girl form. You cannot go from, literally, logically, Jen, sorry guys out there in the universe listening to this, you cannot logically go from I don't know a thing about it to it's going to completely transform our industry, and that goes right back to the low module.
That's not what she said, though. That's not what she said. She didn't say that. She said that's what I've been told.
Okay, well, that's the same thing. You cannot go from I don't know anything about it, but I've been told blah. You cannot go from there to there. It means nothing.
Well, exactly. So that's why I investigated it. But what it could mean is that I could have solar on my roof and sell it to my neighbor, and they wouldn't have to deal with the utility. And it would all be
unlikely
settled in the technology sphere.
I get it. And that goes back to the utility model and the revenue stream and actual laws. So, I have to say, I'm trying not to be a curmudgeon about this. I don't see it.
We'll keep your eye on it. I'm keeping my eye on it,
so you don't have to. In certain select markets, I don't see it. So maybe in 5 years, on that 3 and 3, in 5 years, you and I can come back, and if you can say, well, look, it's all over blah, I can say, it's interesting, I've been watching it, and I see it now.
All right, deal.
Given laws, etc., particularly laws,
deal.
I don't see it.
Okay, deal. Let's talk about diversity. So I wanted to bring this up because I had the pleasure of interviewing Abby Hopper, who is the new CEO of the Solar Energy Industries Association in the U.S., the lobbying arm for the solar industry. She has got a very tough job, but she laid out her top 3 goals for me for the industry and for her role in where she sits now. And one of those goals is to make the solar industry, from the users, the people that actually are buying solar, all the way up to the people who are installing it, creating it, manufacturing it, to make that industry look like our population in America. So lots of diversity, women, men, all races, all ages. I think it's a great goal. I've never had a new CEO tell me that, so I was impressed.
I'm impressed too, and I'll throw an anecdote out there. It was 2 years ago. I was a guest lecturer at a friend's course on environmental law at UC Santa Cruz, and what I know about is solar, so it was essentially a give and take, kind of a rowdy group of people, but towards the end, a young guy who comes from this is such a cliche, but he did actually stand up and say, I come from a lower middle class neighborhood in Los Angeles. He's black. And he said, we never see you guys in our neighborhood. So you're right. We are not diverse. We do not, this is what is no longer popular, but is the truth in the U.S. We are a melting pot. There are different cultures, different races. My family, my stepmother was Mexican American. My stepsisters and brothers Mexican American. My niece is Mexican American, or half. I don't know how you want to divide that one up. So we don't see that in the solar industry in the U.S. We don't see it from those running companies down. We don't see much of it.
Right.
Let me put it that way.
I know, we don't. Right. And so I think her having that as one of the initiatives she'd really like to try to work on is a good one.
Absolutely.
You and I both sit on the Women in Power Committee with Penwell, and it is our mission to inspire younger women to pursue careers in energy, and that's important as well, because as we know, studies have shown that women bring a diverse perspective, and companies that have women in leadership roles do make more money. And there have been a couple of studies that have pointed that out.
Let's broaden it. If we're going to talk about diversity, come on, companies run by blacks, by Hispanics,
yes, totally.
By Asians, we need all of that diversity, and we need women. It's going back to women and circling back to our committee, which I love. We need people to submit, by the way, and people that are candidates for that award. So everybody step up and do that. But we need women who, when they're asked what advice they're going to give to younger women, say things like, stick with it, be yourself, drive it forward, be ambitious, be creative. Don't pay attention to the man in the room that is telling you to shut up and sit down. Yeah. And we don't need them to say, don't cry, act like you can fit in. We need them to lead.
Good. Yeah, I agree. So we are way over time. We got to say goodbye, everybody. All right.
Everybody.
Until next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.